Welcome to Spirit of the Midwest, a show featuring interviews and stories that expose the deep values and pride found in the heart of America. My name is Sika Hicks, and I'm here today with my co-host, Wesley Noble.
And we are here with Colby Jennings, who is an artist and teacher from Springfield, Missouri. As an artist, he works with time-based media, installation, and performance, and he is an assistant professor in the art and design department at Missouri State University, also here in Springfield. His work has been exhibited both nationally and internationally, and it's really awesome. And we're super excited to get to talk with you today, Colby. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Oh, it's going to be great. I'm so excited. So just diving right in, we like to ask what your story is, how you got to the place you are today, and what your journey was.
Okay, so you saved the hard questions for the first. I actually grew up just right south of Kansas City in a little town called Butler, Missouri. And nothing terribly interesting went on for the first, 18 years or so, or arguably after that. But, it was a small rural farming community. And I would definitely say those influences have stuck with me. Not just the people that you meet there, but, also the landscape, which that didn't become apparent to me until I was in grad school. But anyway, so I did my undergrad at Missouri State in Springfield, Missouri. And then my wife and I found our way out to Washington State for grad school. And it was there when I really realized how important the connection to the Midwest was for me. I figured I'd put that in there since, your podcast is called Spirit of the Midwest.
Yeah.
I'd work that in right from the beginning. But, it was interesting. The landscape out there, it was on the east side of the state, and it was a lot of really worn down rolling hills, probably ancient mountains or something to that effect. But, it was a really weird land, because you find yourselves down in the valleys between these hills, these really, really large hills. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't see, you couldn't see like you used to in the Midwest. Sometimes, especially out sort of in the big farming expanses of the Midwest, you can just kind of see forever.
Yeah.
That landscape was something that I missed. So as much as I wanted to really fit in out in Washington, I got out of undergrad and I just thought, no, just no way. I'm not coming back. Not going to do it. I'm done with Springfield, done with Missouri. And that time away, basically made a big joke out of all that. It gets in your blood and it stays there, and you get connections with certain personality types, and you get connections with the land, and you get connections with certain value structures, and so that's kind of what led me here. So anyway, so after grad school, it just sort of worked out that my wife to make our way back here to Springfield, and I get to do what I love on a daily basis. I absolutely love my job, and Springfield has been good to me, so I can't complain.
Very cool. And can you explain what you do, even to someone who's not familiar with that type of work, and even how you got into it, the story there?
Sure. So I started out actually with computer animation in the program, the Bachelor's of Fine Arts computer animation program here at Missouri State, and I had a wonderful instructor who basically helped me through sort of a period of struggle that I was going through. That the animation itself wasn't really the proper vehicle for expression. I was very much into video, and I was very much into interacting with art, but not in the same fashion that you would find. I was really influenced by a lot of the music and a lot of the videos that you would find, let's say, on MTV of the time, but I didn't want to do work like that. I was interested in other things, and being from a smaller town, and not necessarily, even though we did have access in Kansas City to, really a world-class museum in the Nelson Atkins, my experience was very limited in terms of art outside of, paint on canvas, ink on paper kinds of things. So somebody opened up this other world to me of the ability to express yourself through these digital mediums, interacting with work in a little bit different ways, things that would ask you to question things. I don't know, intrigue, question, anxiety. Those are sort of the playgrounds for me.
Mm.
And those were things that I was able to express through video and through motion images and through, interacting with work, setting up an installation that responds to your experience when you're there, or responds to your, your presence when you're there. The experience changes. Um, so, so really translate out, the idea of the interactive kiosk and the interactive museum installation to then more of a fine arts sort of focus, and that's kind of where I live. That's my little playground area.
That's really cool. And I actually lived in Kansas City for a while, and so I'm very familiar with Nelson Atkins and some of the displays there that are slightly interactive, like where you walk up and something subtly changes but not immersive. And I have seen photos and videos of ones that are truly interactive where you come up and the whole thing like comes to life, and then as you move through it, you're interacting with the art, and that field really, really fascinates me. And I mean, do we have anything like that here in Springfield?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm definitely not trying to plug anything here, but
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah.
some of my students have actually worked with the Discovery Center here in Springfield to help them. Yeah, I think it was called the World Wise exhibition or exhibit up on the top floor of their space.
Hmm.
And a group of my students helped them translate that from being more of a static experience to they basically used augmented reality, some sort of prepackaged augmented reality applications, and loaded it with content so that users and viewers can walk in, pick up their mobile phone, or they can pick up one of the iPads that's provided by the Discovery Center, and really kind of changes the experience through some QR codes and some image recognition.
Oh, neat.
So
Oh, that's so cool. That was Jody McFarland and now Jody Butts, who did that, right?
that's correct. That's Jody and Mike Owens. Yep.
Very
Nice.
cool.
Yeah, they're
Very cool.
Jody's good friends of ours, and we the augmented reality stuff. So, I'm gonna go on down this tangent for a minute. So, how does augmented reality change in your mind? Change the work that you've done previously? Like, would you ever consider going back to things that you've done in the past? Which I'd love to talk to you about in a minute, like some of the stuff you've done in the past. But have you ever looked back at some of that and said, could I, reinvent this, or could I have done this differently with things like augmented reality?
Oh, constantly. I'm constantly looking back at things. As an artist, I'm somebody that lives with my work and
Mm.
has to live with it. And sometimes, depending on, when something is quote unquote completed, I'll live with it for a while before I'm ever able to sort of turn it loose out into the wild. And other times I continue to revisit and want to revisit things. And at a certain point, you've got to sort of pause yourself from doing that. But absolutely, I look back a lot and want to revisit things. But I keep a sketchbook, as do probably most artists, creatives, designers, whatever. Theater folks, even. But that sketchbook is so full of other stuff that I want to get to, that I need to get to, that sort of is burning a hole in the page of that sketchbook, that
Yeah.
man, if you just revisited everything, you'd need more than one lifetime to do it.
Yeah, no, I have a habit of carrying notebooks in my bag, and they fill up with strange things sometimes, but it's, there's like this one thing I'm working on, and then there's like these five things that I happened along the way, and I was like, well, I can't just not record them. So they have to go somewhere, but
Oh, absolutely. And I was even laying in bed last night, I was occasionally I get a bout of insomnia or something, and typically it's because something gets in my head and it's gnawing a hole and it just
mm,
needs to come out. And if I don't get up and write it down, it's not going to leave me alone. So I got up and did that, and then I ended up falling in a hole down the internet. So, um,
Would you be able to give us an example of one of your favorite pieces that you've done and walk us through what exactly happens, just so we can get a better idea of what you do?
sure. So I one of my favorites. Um, One of the things that I think got closest to the way I envisioned it, I guess that would be um, a good way of sort of assessing my favorite, was a piece that I did towards the end of my grad studies. that involved a space that I was able to control. So the lighting was dimmed, and it involved two projectors. One of the projectors was hung from the ceiling, suspended from the ceiling, and pointed down at the ground. And on that projector, there was displayed a video of water, just some water that I had recorded, that I had later manipulated. But and then on the wall, there was an image of me that was sort of ghosted, and it's not important that it was me; it just so happened to be me. But um, the the image was sort of multiple layers of a particular performance, and that performance was a simple one of picking up water in your hands and then sort of dipping it over my face, not
Hmm.
quite, in the action of washing your face, but just sort of just taking the water over my head. So so that this water that's projected down on the floor now of the gallery is kind of reacting as I'm dipping down. It's the ripples are building on
Huh.
that not on that water. And then when there's a camera that through motion tracking senses when a viewer is in that space, when they're in front of that pool, when they get closer to it, and then the pool responds to their presence as well, through ripples, through small ripples in this pool that I'm sort of, I guess, conceptually dipping down into and pulling water from.
Oh, neat.
Huh. And what is that? What did that signify? What was the message in that?
Uh, lots of things. That particular one was a lot about, at that particular time, it was important for me to just sort of see things as they were and not as I wanted them to be, to accept things. I was really, really, really influenced by different types of philosophy and different teachers that I was working with, and sort of that weird relationship to the landscape that I was just never quite able to put my roots down into. Sort of a want and a need to get back to my own roots, and just it was a lot about that sort of process of acceptance. And I think a lot of artists go through that. I just happened to go through mine in grad school instead of earlier or later.
Hmm.
So,
So
um,
I have a question regarding when you were talking about your origins. You were saying that there were a lot of hills, right? And you couldn't really see the open landscape of the Midwest like we classically think of it. And so one of the pieces that you've done in the past was a tour of the monuments of Passaic. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
So it's the way you describe it on your site is my work chronicles the shell of a landscape left in the wake of the transition from small farming operations that once supported communities to the current trend of large industrial farming operations, which left these communities on the vine to wither. And so you have deserted fueling stations and communication and energy poles that are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Like they kind of half made it to their destination. And then you see the community continue on, like where the electricity didn't reach, things like that. And so I'm just curious, like with things like this, and then with your origin of not getting to kind of look out and see the rolling hills and so forth as much, did you find that when you started stepping out of where you came from, or when you started exploring more areas of Midwest, and kind of that time when you said you were done, with a lot of Missouri and so forth, did you start discovering these things, and it kind of, like, how did that affect your scope of the Midwest itself, but then also of the things that were around you that you could go explore?
Well, and so to back up just a little bit, one of the things that was so foreign to me when I was in Washington was all of the hills that I couldn't see. I really couldn't see out that long expanse.
Hmm.
Where I grew up in Butler, Missouri, was very much a place that the sweet landscape was something that I could look out and see. The farmlands were just sort of went on. Butler is right in the area where sort of the hills of the Ozarks start to transition into the plains of sort of the northern Midwest. So that was something that I did miss when I was in grad school in Washington State. But so to go back to your question then about that particular piece or that series of photographs and that you're talking about, that particular work, to be fair, is largely inspired by Robert Smithson and his work, A Tour of the Monuments of Passaic. So that was the title of it. But he happened to be talking about Passaic, New Jersey.
Hmm.
And he was talking about a landscape that was essentially chewed up by industrial, post-industrial sort of time periods of the United States, where large expanses of land were transformed into manufacturing sites that were then sort of just left to sort of wither and rot, after they were used up and done, or after the ground was so poorly mistreated and polluted that, they couldn't go in and even afford to clean it up. So they just abandoned it,
Hmm.
whatever the case may be. So I was really interested in that, and that's not necessarily the work he's known for. He's known for larger land sort of pieces, but that particular work was interesting because I lived 5 minutes south of a town called Passaic, Missouri, and it was very much a little small town that never quite made it. It that reference to on the vine, and I'm not really sure that I wrote that. That might be something that was written about it by somebody else, because I don't. That just was way. That sounded way too good to me. I'm not a writer, so that probably wasn't me. There's a reason why I make images. There's a there's a definite reason why I do what I do. But in any case, it's pretty accurate, whatever that was written about that, because Passaic never quite made it. It tried to grow, and agriculture was really its lifeblood, and the industrialization of agriculture, these large farming operations, which, not passing judgment, not saying anything negative other than just it exists. That transition has really left small towns sort of in its wake, and left them to dry up. And Butler is another town that's really struggling to define itself. What does it mean to be an agricultural community, and a community really that's dependent upon agriculture, when it really no longer requires as many people as what it used to? You
Hmm.
know, there's little to no industry in my hometown. It's a commuter community. People typically work outside of that, and people that work inside of the community work in service industries, or they work in the grocery stores, or it's quite interesting. People are, I think, this is happening in a lot of rural communities that are really struggling to define themselves.
Yeah.
Hmm. I have a question about your artist statement. And one of the things you say in there is that you make in order to understand. Can you explain that a little bit?
I hope so. Um, so to go back earlier when I was talking about I live with my work a lot.
Hmm.
I I subscribe to artwork and lots of other forms of expression, whether it be visual, um, through audio, through whatever. It's a way to gain different kinds of understanding. And I used to think knowledge was the appropriate term for that, but I don't think knowledge is quite right for that anymore. It's more like insight.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a way to digest experiences, emotions, things that are confusing, perplexing, anxieties. It's a way to digest those things externally, or to put them out there externally, and then digest them, almost not quite from a third party perspective, um, but at a bit more of a safe distance. You can sort of get that outside of your body, deal with it, consume it, digest it in a more comfortable setting, or at least in a time period that's more conducive to maybe whatever the weight of that emotion was. And so I don't know, I'm probably dancing around the question a little bit. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
But I think that for me makes the most sense. That's why I again do what I do. That's why my work is the way that it is. It's because it helps me. I'm probably a selfish artist in that way. Some artists would say that they paint because they want to share an experience with somebody, or they want to share a sunset, or they want to do something. Um, but that's not the case for me. I make for me because I'm trying to figure something out, and I'm,
Hmm.
I'm I'm not the only artist that does that. But I'm
No,
just
not at
saying.
all.
But I make because I'm trying to figure something out. There was something that sucked about this moment, or there was something that was really strange about this, or there was something here that I couldn't figure out because it instilled that fight or flight anxiety in me, and I just don't know what it was. So let's get it out there and then deal with it. It's just I don't know, coping mechanism, I guess.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that makes total sense. And if we could talk a little bit about your anxiety, because also in that artist statement, it talked about how you disarm your anxieties through your work, which is just fascinating. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So again, a lot of artists deal with anxiety. And I'm not even going to try and quote anybody, but I came across something in grad school where an artist was talking about, anxiety sort of being the playground or the lifeblood or something of a particular group or body of artists. And I really identified with that because at the time I was even sort of struggling to understand what the notion of identity was, right? Um, again, so my community was incredible to grow up in. I used to say again that I never wanted to go back to Butler and I never wanted to go back to my hometown and this and that, and there just wasn't much there. And maturity has helped me realize just how great of a place it was to grow up.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean there weren't any things that stuck with me that didn't sit in and maybe develop into an anxiety or
Yeah, sure.
probably a source of something that came out of maybe even a personal insecurity. Masculinity was something that I was addressing for a while, and the idea of what it meant to be male was very much defined through particular actions or even costuming. And I say costuming again, and not in a pejorative term, but
Hmm.
costuming in terms of men look a certain way. They act a certain way, particularly the sort of stoic male within the community. I got to meet a lot of those types. Um, and to have a respect for that and to admire that about this particular regional culture, about these people that you grew up with, but yet to not quite understand that or feel like that's appropriate for you or something. That was just a weird disconnect. So that was one of
Mm.
the anxieties that got me started down that path.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's neat to look back at places where, I grew up I was spent 24 years in Omaha, Nebraska, and it's kind of cool to look back and see, especially when you go back and visit those places and to see how the landscape hasn't physically changed, but it's changed in the way you look at it. It's changed in the way that you react with it, and shops that you used to go to or places you thought were interesting, you see in a different light. And I think it's so healthy to have that distance, but then I've lived in the Midwest my whole life, and so there's kind of that. Each one of those places is different, but then the people are, so much of what the constant is in this area of the country, and
Sure.
that's one thing that I've just loved about all the places I've lived. I lived in Kansas City, I've lived here in Springfield, lived in Omaha, and the landscape is so different. But a lot of times, like you're saying, you can get those people that look the same or act the same, and it teaches you something about how the environment affects them and how they can affect where they live and what builds a town.
Absolutely. And you can't, something that I've learned is the interconnectedness, I guess, of the psychological landscape with the physical landscape,
Mm.
how they push and pull back and forth with one another. And it's never quite clear what made who or who made what, are these, are these personality traits that sort of get nurtured within these communities? Are they a product of the environment? Are they a product of the industry there, or is the land sort of being shaped and molded by people who are drawn to this lifestyle? I mean, it's an interesting sort of dance between, like I said, the psychological and the physical landscape. And again, that's another thing that I've been interested in as not necessarily trying to visualize anymore, but
Mm.
just as a way to sort of take into account when during my thinking processes.
So if you could go back and say something to your younger self, or have a word of wisdom to that struggling grad school student, or even before then in those 18 years where you said you didn't learn as much or do as much, what would you do if you were to look back and ask, or give like to be the hand on the shoulder for that younger Colby?
Yeah. Um, it's funny that I think about that quite a bit. Um, like I said, my upbringing was really not all that uncommon, probably for a lot of people. My parents are wonderful, both very hardworking. My father, he didn't get to go to school beyond high school. My mother is cosmetologists. So they definitely instilled in me a strong work ethic.
Mm.
They have worked for everything. I'm not going to say that they, to say that they didn't have people there to help when they could would be to do them a disservice as well as the people that helped them.
Mm.
But you know what? They have then reached out and tried to help my wife and I when we were starting. We were getting started, and so that energy, that spirit. I think if I could reach back, gosh, I'd say a lot of things to young Colby. That would be one thing I would tell Colby is just to like chill and respect this and to look at this in all its complexities, to look at this community in all its complexities, to look at these relationships in all its complexities. And that's something that's hard because it takes maturity. And I'm not even going to try and say that I'm mature now, but it's growing on me. And again, like distance is really, really helpful for that maturing process. But to just slow down and to see things as they are, again, not as I would like them to be. I mean, that's a personal mantra these days, just to see things as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would have helped a lot of sort of those young person anxieties that sort of popped up.
Mm.
But again, I don't know if that would have done me any service, because then maybe I would have ended up with other ones, because I think that's an important part of growing. But that would be the big one, just to realize how wonderful and complex those relationships are. And look, I had grandparents who definitely supported my pursuit of the arts. They were also concerned when they realized that they had supported it so much that I wanted to go into the arts for a profession. But again, that's because that community, that culture doesn't really, I mean, everything's so much grounded in how are you going to support yourself? How are you going to live? How are you going to support your family? And I did want a family at the time, or not at the time, obviously, but I thought I wanted one eventually.
Sure.
And that was so much, I mean, that people just breathe that in. You'd walk around in my town and you breathe that in. So, how did the arts fit into that? And you're seeing that play out in small rural schools as well, where funding is being pulled away from all kinds of things because really everyone just assumes, well, what's the arts going to do for you?
Right.
And I think that's an incredible danger to people's well-being, to young children's well-being, for sure, young kids' well-being.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that is a really good takeaway too, and really something that I kind of I'd love to end on that, because that's such a powerful note for the future generations and for what we're going through right now in this country, that we need to respect the art, we need to respect the people that are around us and where we came from and how we can make that better and improve that for others. So I mean, I don't know a better way to end the show. So Colby, thank you so much for taking time with us today, and I've really appreciated your perspective on a lot of this.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful, and I always enjoy the opportunity to try and vocalize things or talk through things. That's another place where you can really just learn from whatever you've just said, if you can make it out. So thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate you guys' questions too.
Yeah, this was great. You guys can get to know Colby by visiting his website at colbyjennings.com. And you can also learn more about this show by visiting spiritofthemidwest.fm. Please, please, please review the podcast in iTunes. We would love to hear your feedback there. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please join us next time as we celebrate the spirit of the Midwest.